Hello, my name is Marco Navarro, 34 years old. I'm a mechanic and the owner of a small garage on the outskirts of Flagstaff, Arizona, where dusty red roads stretch beneath the shadow of the San Francisco peaks, where the wind always carries the scent of pine and the crisp chill of the high plateau. My life is simple, just the clatter of repair tools, the smell of engine oil, and quiet evenings with a cup of black coffee in the small house I rent on the edge of town. But the story I'm about to tell isn't about the me of today. It's about the me from 7 years ago, when I was 27. When everything in my life began to veer in a direction I could never have imagined. I grew up in a Mexican-American family where tradition and family duty were held above all, at least in name. My father, Mateo Navarro, was a businessman who owned a civil construction company, inherited from my grandfather, Julio Navarro. My grandfather passed away long ago, leaving a substantial estate to my grandmother, Beatriz Navarro. My father ran the company with an iron hand, always proud of carrying on the family legacy. My mother, Adriana Cruz, was a homemaker, but don't let her gentle demeanor fool you. She was the one who managed every penny in the household, sharp and calculating. They lived in Scottsdale, a wealthy suburb near Phoenix where lavish homes with golf courses and swimming pools were commonplace. And me? I was always the odd one out. From a young age, I didn't fit in with my family. While my parents wanted me to study business and take over the company, I preferred taking things apart and fixing them. Everything from a neighbor's old bicycle to a broken truck engine. I liked being independent, the feeling of creating something with my own hands, without relying on the Navarro name or the family's wealth. That made me a stranger in my own home. My parents saw me as a failure, a blemish on their perfect picture. "Marco, you can't live like a mechanic your whole life," my father once shouted at me during a dinner. I just bowed my head, swallowed the words I wanted to say, and left the table. I moved out right after high school, took a technical course at a community college, and found work in Flagstaff, a few hours' drive from Scottsdale. I rarely visited home, not because I didn't want to, but because every time I did, I felt the coldness in my parents' eyes. They never said it outright, but I knew they were ashamed of me. A grown son who didn't fit the mold, who lacked ambition, who didn't want to flaunt the family name. "You should learn to network, Marco," my mother once said, her voice gentle but sharp as a knife. "You can't keep living like a loner." I gave a faint smile, nodded, and found an excuse to leave early. My grandmother Beatrice was the only person in the family who made me feel understood, even if just a little. She lived with my parents in Scottsdale, in keeping with Mexican family tradition. Children are expected to care for their parents as they age. She was a petite woman with snow-white hair, her eyes always radiating kindness but also resilience. She often told me stories about my grandfather, about their younger days in Mexico, building a life from nothing. But I noticed that despite living in my parents' grand house, she didn't truly belong there. There was an invisible distance between her and my parents, as if they only kept her there out of duty, or perhaps for something larger that I had never fully understood. I remember the rare times I visited home. My grandmother would pull me out to the backyard where she tended a small flower garden. She'd show me each cactus, each cluster of wildflowers, and tell me stories I'd heard since childhood but never tired of. "Marco, you're like your grandfather," she'd say, her voice warm and steady. He too liked to do things himself without waiting for handouts. Those words were like a soothing balm, but they also made me sad. If I was like my grandfather, why did my parents see me as a failure? The relationship between my grandmother and my parents wasn't exactly harmonious either. I overheard fragments of arguments when they thought I wasn't around. My parents often dropped hints about my grandfather's estate. The land in Mexico, shares in construction companies, and the large Scottsdale house that my grandmother still held. Before he passed, my grandfather had left everything to her, not to my father. That seemed to be a thorn in my parents' side. They never said it outright, but I could feel the tension whenever the topic of the estate came up. You should think about the future, about dividing the assets fairly, my father once said during a dinner, his voice calm but laced with intent. My grandmother only smiled, saying nothing, but I saw a fleeting sadness in her eyes. I didn't care about money or inheritance. I just wanted to live my life, free from the weight of family expectations. But deep down, I always felt a void, a sense of not belonging anywhere, of not being truly loved by anyone. I wondered if I was living wrong, if I'd missed a chance to connect with my family. But every time I visited home, that sense of estrangement became even clearer. My parents looked at me like a stranger, and I looked at them like people I'd never truly understood. One autumn afternoon when I was 27, I got a call from my mother. Her voice was gentle, but I knew immediately something was wrong. "Marco, I want you to come home this weekend. There's a family matter we need to discuss." I frowned, still holding a wrench, standing in the middle of my garage filled with the smell of oil. "What's going on, Mom?" I asked cautiously. "Just come, and we'll talk," she replied, then hung up. I stood there, staring at the phone, a sense of unease creeping into my heart. I didn't know that trip home would change everything, not just for me, but for the entire family. I drove to Scottsdale one weekend morning, the I-17 highway stretching out before me, flanked by low mountains and sparse pine forests. Flagstaff and Scottsdale were just over 2 hours apart, but to me, the distance wasn't just geographical. Every time I returned, it felt like stepping into another world, a world of luxurious homes, extravagant parties, and fake smiles. I pulled up in front of my parents' large house, a Spanish-style villa with red-tiled roofs and a meticulously maintained front yard. I took a deep breath, bracing myself for whatever was coming. My grandmother was the one who opened the door. She wore a long, light blue dress, her hair neatly tied back, her kind smile easing my tension. "Marco, you're here," she exclaimed, hugging me tightly. I felt the warmth of her embrace, something I rarely experienced in this house. "Are you okay, Grandma?" I asked, looking into her eyes. She nodded, but I caught a fleeting sadness. "I'm fine, dear, just old and sometimes tired." Her voice was soft, but something about it unsettled me. My parents were in the living room when I walked in. My father sat in an armchair, flipping through a financial newspaper, while my mother stood near the window holding a glass of wine. "Marco, you're here," my mother said, her voice light but lacking warmth. My father looked up, gave a single nod, then returned to his paper. No hugs, no questions, just the familiar cold atmosphere. I sat on the sofa, feeling more like a guest than a son. "What did you call me here for?" I asked directly, not wanting to beat around the bush. My mother glanced at my father, then turned to me with a forced smile. "It's a family matter, Marco. It's about Grandma." My heart beat faster. "What's wrong with Grandma?" I asked, my voice slightly urgent. My father set down the newspaper, looking at me with an unreadable expression. "Your grandmother isn't young anymore. We need to talk about the future, about what she's leaving behind." I frowned, the unease growing stronger. "What do you mean?" "She's still healthy." My mother chimed in, her voice sweet but calculated. "You don't understand, Marco. Your grandmother holds a lot, houses, land, shares. We just want to make sure everything is arranged properly for the good of the family." I looked at my grandmother, sitting quietly in the corner of the room, her hands clasped tightly. She said nothing, just lowered her head, but I noticed her fingers trembling slightly. Something was wrong. Very wrong. That evening, after a quiet dinner, I went out to the backyard to find my grandmother. She was sitting on a wooden bench, gazing at the wildflowers under the moonlight. I sat beside her, unsure of what to say. "You seem sad, Grandma," I said softly. She turned to me, a faint smile on her face. "You've always been perceptive, Marco. I just feel like things are changing. There are things I don't want to say out loud, but they make me uneasy." I wanted to ask more, but she placed a hand on my shoulder, shaking her head. "Not now, my dear, but I'm glad you're here." That night I couldn't sleep. My grandmother's words, my parents' looks, and the stifling atmosphere of the house made me feel like I was stepping into a chess game where I didn't know the rules. I had no idea that just a few weeks later, an unexpected trip would unravel everything. Secrets, schemes, and wounds I never thought I'd have to face. A few weeks after that evening, I returned to Flagstaff, immersing myself in the familiar routine of the garage. The sound of wrenches clanging against bolts, the smell of engine oil, and brief conversations with customers helped me temporarily forget the unease I felt in Scottsdale. But that feeling never truly went away. It was like a small thorn pricking my heart. Not painful, but a constant reminder that something was wrong in my family. I tried not to dwell on it, until my mother called again one Wednesday afternoon while I was wiping my hands after a long day of fixing cars. "Marco, can you arrange to take a few days off soon?" Her voice was gentle, but I detected a hint of urgency, as if she was trying to hide something. "What's going on, Mom?" I asked, still holding an oil-stained rag. "It's the family reunion in Mexico, the one we hold every 3 years," she said. "You know, we usually take your grandmother, but this year your father is tied up with company business, so I'd like you to take her." I froze, surprised. The family reunion was a long-standing Navarro tradition, a major event where relatives from all over, Arizona, Mexico, even California, gathered in the small village in Sonora where my grandfather was born. As a kid, I loved those trips. The smell of tacos grilling over charcoal, the sound of guitars echoing in the night, and the lively stories from aunts and uncles. But since starting college and moving out to live on my own in Flagstaff, I'd barely attended. Work, distance, and that lingering sense of being out of place in my own family always gave me an excuse to skip them. Now, my mother wanted me to take my grandmother on a 5-day trip across the border, just the two of us. I questioned her, my voice tinged with doubt. "You and Dad have always managed to make time before?" She sighed over the phone, sounding slightly weary. "The company has a big project right now, Marco. Your father can't leave Scottsdale at the moment. I know you're busy, but your grandmother really wants to go. Can you please help us out this time?" I paused for a moment, thinking of my grandmother, of the sadness in her eyes back in Scottsdale. "All right," I replied, unsure if I was making the right decision. "I'll take her." After hanging up, I stood in the middle of the garage, staring at the half-repaired pickup truck. There was something in my mother's voice that unsettled me, as if she was pushing me into something I didn't fully understand. But I brushed the thought aside. This was a chance to spend time with my grandmother, to hear the stories I'd missed over the years. I had no idea that this trip would become a turning point, not just in my relationship with her, but in how I viewed my entire family. The departure day came faster than I expected. I drove my old pickup truck, a Ford F-150 that had seen a few owners but still ran well, to Scottsdale to pick up my grandmother. She was standing at the front door wearing a beige sweater and a long skirt, holding a small green suitcase. Beside her was a cloth bag filled with food she'd prepared, tamales wrapped in corn husks, a few oranges, and a large bottle of water. "You don't need to bring anything, Marco," she said, her smile radiant. "I've got everything covered." I laughed, helping her load the suitcase into the truck, feeling like I was a kid again when she'd slipped me a piece of candy before school. My parents stood at the door to see us off, but there were no hugs or warm wishes. My father gave a curt nod and said, "Be careful on the road." My mother smiled, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. "Call me when you get there, Marco," she said, then turned back into the house. I watched them, the unease creeping back, but I said nothing. I opened the truck door for my grandmother and we hit the road. The drive from Scottsdale to the Mexican border was over 300 miles, passing through Arizona's arid deserts, lonely small towns, and low mountains shrouded in early morning mist. My grandmother sat in the passenger seat, hands clasped in her lap, gazing out the window with a distant look. I played an old Vicente Fernandez CD, the kind of music she loved, and the atmosphere in the truck became more comfortable. When the music paused, my grandmother started telling stories. She spoke about my grandfather, about their younger days when he worked on construction sites in Mexico while she raised 3 children on a meager salary. "Your grandfather was stubborn," she said, her eyes sparkling. "But he loved his family. He always said, 'Beatrice, money doesn't matter as long as we have each other.'" I nodded, listening, but my thoughts drifted to my parents. They loved the family too, but why did I always feel they loved money more? The conversation shifted to more recent matters. She talked about her small garden in Scottsdale, the wildflowers she grew, and how she missed the days living in Mexico. But then her voice grew quieter, as if she was choosing her words carefully. "Marco, I've been feeling tired lately," she said, staring out the window. "Not tired from age, but tired in my heart. Your parents, they..." She trailed off, shaking her head. "They're just busy, I suppose." I gripped the steering wheel tighter, the unease resurfacing. "Grandma, if something's wrong, you have to tell me," I said, my voice serious. She smiled, but the smile couldn't hide her sadness. "I know, dear, but for now, let me enjoy this trip with you." We stopped at a small gas station near the border to refuel and rest. I bought a bottle of water and a bag of chips while my grandmother sat on a bench outside the station watching the passing trucks. When I returned, she was holding an old, creased photo of my grandfather standing next to a vintage truck, his smile beaming. "This was your grandfather when he first started the company," she said, handing me the photo. "You're like him, Marco. You don't like depending on anyone." I took the photo, feeling a lump in my throat. "I'm not as good as him," I said, forcing a smile. She took my hand, squeezing it gently. "You're better than you think." The next leg of the journey was smoother, but as we approached the mountainous region near the border, the sky began to darken. The roads were narrow and winding, flanked by rocky cliffs and sparse pine forests. I drove slowly, cautiously, unfamiliar with the terrain. My grandmother continued to talk, but I noticed she spoke less, as if she were sinking into her own thoughts. I wanted to ask more about what she'd mentioned earlier, about my parents, but I didn't want to upset her. I only hoped this trip would lift her spirits, even just a little. Then, as we navigated a sharp curve on the deserted mountain road, the truck suddenly jolted. A sharp pop rang out, and I felt the vehicle tilt to one side. "Damn it," I muttered, slowing down and pulling over to the shoulder. "Must be a flat tire." My grandmother looked at me, slightly worried. "Are you okay, dear?" she asked. I nodded, trying to keep my voice calm. "It's fine, Grandma. I'll change the tire in no time." I stepped out of the truck and checked the rear right wheel. Sure enough, the tire was flat with a large gash in the sidewall. I sighed, grabbed my tools from the truck bed, and started changing the tire under the dim glow of a flashlight. My grandmother stayed in the truck, the window rolled down, watching me work. "Be careful, Marco," she said, her voice tinged with concern. I smiled, trying to reassure her. "I do this every day, Grandma. It's no big deal." But as I was tightening a bolt, she suddenly spoke, her voice trembling in a way that startled me. "Marco, come here and look at this." I stopped, wiped the sweat from my forehead, and walked to her side of the truck. She was leaning down toward the floorboard, holding a clear plastic bag filled with a suspicious white powder. Her eyes were wide with panic, her hands shaking uncontrollably. "What is this, Marco?" she asked, her voice almost choking. I took the bag from her, feeling its weight, easily close to 10 pounds. My mind reeled as if the ground had just collapsed beneath me. "Grandma, where did you find this?" I asked, my voice faltering. She pointed to the floor under the passenger seat. "It was here, right under the seat. I dropped my water bottle and bent down to pick it up, and then I saw it." I took the bag from her hands, inspecting it closely. It was carefully hidden, tucked deep into a crevice under the seat, as if someone had deliberately placed it where it wouldn't be easily found. My mind raced with questions. What is this? No, it's definitely drugs, there's no mistaking it. But where did it come from? Who put it in my truck? And why? I looked at my grandmother, trying to stay calm, but my heart was pounding like it might burst. "Grandma, I swear this isn't mine," I said, my voice trembling with anger and confusion. "I don't know where it came from." She looked at me, and her gaze wasn't one of doubt, but of a terrifying certainty, as if she'd just confirmed something she'd long suspected. "Marco," she whispered, her voice so low I had to lean in to hear her. "I don't think this was an accident." Her words hit me like a knife to the chest. A chill ran down my spine, not from the cold mountain night, but from the implication of what she said. Not an accident? What did she mean? Was someone deliberately trying to set me up? I grabbed my phone, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped it. I called my mother, my voice laced with panic. "Mom, what's going on? There's a bag of drugs in my truck. Do you know anything about this?" There was a long pause before she responded, her tone so surprised it felt rehearsed. "Marco, what are you talking about? I don't know anything about that. How could something like that be in your truck?" I demanded she pass the phone to my father, but he denied everything too, his voice eerily calm. "Calm down, Marco. It's probably a mistake. Maybe a customer left something in your truck at the garage." "A mistake?" I shouted, unable to hold back. "Dad, this wasn't left behind. It was hidden under the seat. And it's a lot, almost 10 pounds. But he just repeated, his voice cold as ice. "Stay calm, deal with it, and keep going. Don't worry your grandmother." I hung up, gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. I looked at my grandmother, who was bowing her head, hands clasped tightly, lips pressed together as if holding something back. "Grandma, do you know anything about this bag?" I asked, my voice almost pleading. She shook her head, her eyes now filled not just with worry but with deep fear. "Marco, I'm not sure, but I've heard them talking. Your parents. They've mentioned needing to resolve things about the estate. I think they didn't want me to go to Mexico this time." Her words felt like a punch to my chest. I stood frozen, my mind spinning. Resolve? The estate? This bag of drugs? Could it be connected to my parents? The thought drove me to the edge of madness, but I couldn't dismiss it. Too many things didn't add up. The sudden flat tire, the bag hidden under the seat, and the fake tone in my parents' voices over the phone. I tucked the plastic bag into my jacket, trying to stay composed. "Grandma, I'll finish changing the tire and we'll keep going," I said, my voice firm. "But I need you to tell me everything. If there's something dangerous, I need to know." She nodded, but her eyes were still filled with anxiety. "Be careful, Marco," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "I don't want to lose you." I went back to changing the tire, but my mind was no longer on the task. I thought about my parents, about the times they'd hinted at my grandmother's estate, about how they looked at me like I was an inconvenience. Could they really do something to harm her? Or even me? That bag. If we were stopped by the police, if they found it, I'd be arrested and my grandmother would be implicated. The thought made my blood boil. I tightened the bolts harder, as if channeling my anger into each turn of the wrench. When the tire was finally changed, I got back in the truck but didn't start it right away. I looked at my grandmother, searching for the right words. "Grandma, I don't know what's going on, but I promise I'll protect you. If Mom and Dad, if they're doing something, I won't let them win." She took my hand, squeezing it tightly. "I trust you, Marco," she said, her voice trembling. "But from now on, we have to be careful. Very careful." I started the truck, the headlights illuminating the dark mountain road ahead. But in my heart, the darkness was even thicker. I didn't know what awaited us in Mexico or what was happening within my own family. But one thing I knew for certain. That bag wasn't there by accident, and I would find out the truth no matter the cost. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, my eyes fixed on the winding mountain road, but my mind was a whirlwind of chaotic thoughts. I glanced at my grandmother, searching for words to break the tension. "Grandma, are you okay?" I asked, my voice hoarse. She nodded, but her hands still clutched the hem of her sweater, as if trying to hold herself together. "Marco," she said, her voice low but firm, "we need to talk." I slowed down, finding a wider spot on the road to pull over. My grandmother looked at me, her eyes glinting with a strange mix of pain and resolve. "Marco, I don't want to believe it, but I think your parents are planning something. Not just against me, but against you too." Her words felt like another knife plunging into my heart. I had suspected as much, but hearing my grandmother say it out loud made it all too real, too terrifying. "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She sighed, her gaze drifting to the darkness outside. "Lately, your parents have been talking a lot about your grandfather's estate. They say the company is struggling, that they need money, that I should sign papers to sell land in Mexico. I refused because it was your grandfather's life's work. But they didn't stop. They started saying things that scared me." I frowned, anger rising within me. "What did they say?" She shook her head as if reluctant to recall. "They hinted that I'm old, not in my right mind anymore, that someone might need to manage the estate for me. One time I overheard your father telling your mother that if I wouldn't sign, they'd find another way. And then, this bag." She pointed to my jacket pocket, her voice trembling. "Marco, I think they're trying to harm us." My blood boiled. With the amount of drugs we were carrying, if the police found it, I'd face at least 10 years in prison. My whole body felt like it was on fire. At that moment, I wanted nothing more than to turn the truck around and drive straight back to Scottsdale to confront my parents. But I looked at my grandmother, shivering in her thin sweater, and I knew I had to stay calm. "Grandma," I said firmly, "I won't let them hurt you, but we need a plan." She nodded, her eyes now filled with trust. "Tell me, Marco, I'm listening." I took a deep breath, trying to organize my jumbled thoughts. The bag of drugs was a massive threat. If we were stopped by the police, especially near the Mexican border where checks are strict, I could be arrested, and my grandmother would be implicated. I couldn't let that happen. But if I threw the bag away, I'd lose evidence. And if my parents were truly behind this, I needed proof to expose them. "Grandma, I have an idea," I said, my voice low but resolute. "We'll keep going to Mexico, but you'll go to the reunion alone. I'll drop you off in a nearby town, find a bus or someone trustworthy to take you the rest of the way. I'll head back to Scottsdale and figure out what's going on." My grandmother looked at me, her eyes full of worry. "Marco, that's too dangerous. If your parents are really—" She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. I took her hand, squeezing it gently. "I'll be careful. But you need to be safe first. I won't let them touch you." She was silent for a moment, then nodded. "All right, Marco, but you have to promise me you won't get hurt." I smiled, though my heart was heavy. "I promise." But we both knew that promise wasn't easy to keep. We drove for another hour, reaching a small town called Nogales just across the border. The town was livelier than I expected, with souvenir shops, small eateries, and a few bus stations. I found a clean bus terminal with direct routes to Sonora, our family's hometown. I helped my grandmother buy a ticket, escorted her onto the bus, and entrusted her to an older driver who seemed reliable. "I'll come pick you up after the reunion," I said, hugging her tightly. She held my hand, her eyes filled with both worry and determination. "Marco, I'll be waiting for you. But be careful. They're not the parents you once knew." Her words tightened my chest. I nodded, watching the bus pull away, carrying my grandmother out of sight under the streetlights. I stood there for a moment, a wave of loneliness washing over me. Then I returned to the truck, checking the plastic bag in my jacket. It was still there, a grim reminder of the truth I had to face. I started the engine and turned back towards Scottsdale. It was time to uncover the truth. The road back to Scottsdale was long and monotonous, but it gave me time to think. I recalled small details from over the years. How my parents always talked about my grandmother's estate, how they treated me like an inconvenience, how they pressured her to sign documents. I thought about the bag of drugs, the sudden flat tire. The pieces were starting to fit together, forming a terrifying picture. If my parents were behind this, they didn't just want control of my grandmother's estate. They were willing to sacrifice me to get it. The thought filled me with both rage and pain. They were my parents, but now I wasn't sure if they even saw me as their son anymore. I stopped at a gas station about 30 miles from Scottsdale, pulling out my phone to call an old friend, Javier, who worked at the Flagstaff Police Department. I didn't tell him everything, just asked about the consequences of being caught with drugs. "Marco, if it's narcotics in a significant amount, you could be looking at years in prison," Javier said, his tone grave. "Near the border, it's even worse. They'll assume you're smuggling." A chill ran down my spine. "What if someone planted it in my truck?" I asked. Javier paused. "You'd need proof, Marco. Without it, your word means nothing. Do you suspect anyone?" I didn't answer right away, just thanked him and hung up. As I neared Scottsdale, it was late at night. I didn't want my parents to know I was back, so I parked the truck a few blocks away from their house in a small alley. I checked the plastic bag again, tucking it into a small metal box in the truck bed where I kept my tools. I didn't know what I'd do with it, but I knew I had to keep it safe. Then I turned off the truck's lights, stepped out, and quietly walked toward my parents' large house. The night in Scottsdale was quiet, with only the chirping of crickets and the dim glow of streetlights. I crept along the fence, avoiding the light, my heart pounding. I didn't know what I was looking for: a conversation, a document, or any sign that my parents were truly behind this. But I knew I couldn't turn back. Not for myself, but for my grandmother. She had trusted me, and I wouldn't let her down. I crouched behind a large bush in the backyard, just a few meters from the living room window. My parents' voices drifted out, low but tense, as if they were trying to keep their conversation from being overheard. I inched closer, close enough to see their shadows through the thin curtains. My father, Mateo, stood near the dining table, hands on his hips, his voice laced with frustration. My mother, Adriana, sat on the sofa, clutching a wine glass, her eyes sharp and cold. I pulled out my phone and switched on the recording mode, hoping to capture crucial evidence. "Marco found the bag," my mother said, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and fear. "You said the plan was perfect, but what now? If he realizes it wasn't an accident, we'll lose everything." My blood ran cold. They were talking about the bag of drugs in my truck. They knew I'd found it, and my mother's voice wasn't just worried. It carried the panic of someone watching their plan unravel. My father let out a derisive laugh, his tone icy. "Calm down, Adriana. He has no proof. He's just a dumb mechanic. He wouldn't dare do anything. But we need to act fast. If Mom doesn't sign the papers after this, we'll find another way." My mother leaned back, her eyes no longer just anxious, but tinged with a ruthlessness I'd never seen before. "What do you mean? Another accident?" "Mateo, we've already risked too much. If the police suspect..." "No one will suspect an old woman having a heart attack," my father cut in, his voice lowering as if weighing each word carefully. "She's old. Her health is frail. A dose of medication, a shock. Everyone will think it's natural, and when she's gone, the estate will be ours. Marco won't have a chance to interfere." I stood frozen, my heart pounding so hard I feared they might hear it. Not only had they framed me with the drugs to pressure my grandmother into signing, but now, with that plan at risk of failing, they were willing to kill her to get what they wanted. I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms until they stung. Rage surged within me, but I knew I had to keep a clear head. I took a deep breath, stepped onto the porch, and knocked on the door. The sound echoed in the night, firm and deliberate. My mother opened the door, her eyes flickering with surprise before quickly turning wary. "Marco, what are you doing here? You're supposed to be in Mexico with your grandmother." I stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, my voice cold. "I need to talk. To both of you." My father emerged from the living room holding a glass of whiskey, his eyes sharp as knives. "What's this about, Marco? Why are you back in the middle of the night?" I stood in the middle of the living room looking straight at them. "I found the bag of drugs in my truck," I said, my voice calm but cutting. Hidden under the passenger seat. Do you know anything about it? My mother's face paled, but she quickly regained her composure. Marco, what are you talking about? How would we know? It could belong to a customer from your garage. My father nodded, adding, You should be more careful about the people you work with. I let out a bitter laugh, unable to hold back. A customer? Or did you hire someone to plant it in my truck to frame me? To force Grandma to sign over the estate? The air in the room seemed to freeze. My mother stood abruptly, her voice trembling. How dare you say that to us? Are you out of your mind? But my father raised a hand, signaling her to be quiet. He stared at me, his gaze like it could pierce through me. Don't accuse us without proof. If you do, don't blame us for being ruthless. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. I heard everything. About the drugs, about your next plans to harm your own mother. My mother gasped, but my father let out a dry, hollow laugh. You think you're clever, don't you, Marco? You think you can take us on? You're nothing, a failed mechanic living off the family's money. His words hit like a punch, but I didn't back down. If I'm nothing, why did you need to frame me? Why plan to hurt Grandma? My mother interrupted, her voice nearly a scream. Because we had no choice, Marco. The company is going bankrupt. Your grandmother is holding on to the entire estate and won't give us a cent. We had to do something. My father snapped at her to be quiet, but it was too late. She'd said too much. I pulled my phone, still in recording mode, from my pocket and held it up. Thank you, Mom. I needed exactly those words. My mother froze, stunned, while my father lunged at me, trying to grab the phone. I dodged, but he shoved me against the wall, his hand gripping my collar. You dare, Marco, he roared. You think you can destroy this family? I pushed him off, my voice shaking with fury. Family, you destroyed it long ago. I'm not your son anymore. That night, I drove away from Scottsdale without looking back. The road was pitch black, lit only by the headlights illuminating the empty stretches of highway. I texted Javier, sending him the recording through an encrypted app he'd recommended. Javier, I have proof. Keep it safe for me. I'm going to Mexico to find my grandmother. He replied almost immediately. Marco, are you okay? I'll keep the recording safe, but don't do anything reckless. Call me if you need me. I didn't respond. I wasn't sure if I was okay. Anger and pain still burned in my chest, but I knew I couldn't stop now. My grandmother was waiting for me in Sonora, and I needed her to know I was on her side, even if the whole world turned its back on us. I drove through the night, across Arizona's deserts, over the Mexican border to the small town where the family reunion was taking place. My mind churned with what had just happened. My parents' words about the drugs, their plan to harm my grandmother, and how they saw me as a pawn echoed relentlessly. I used to think that despite their coldness, despite their inability to understand me, they were still family. But now I realized family isn't about blood. It's about those willing to protect each other. And the only person in this family who did that for me was my grandmother. Dawn was breaking when I reached the small village in Sonora. Red dirt roads led into the heart of the village, where low-tiled houses were scattered among cornfields and cacti. The Navarro family reunion was held at a large ranch owned by a distant uncle. I parked under the shade of a pine tree, spotting long tables set up in the yard, covered with white cloths and laden with food. Tacos, tamales, and pitchers of fresh fruit juice. Mariachi music drifted from a distance, mingling with the lively chatter and laughter of relatives. But I felt no joy. I just wanted to find my grandmother. I walked into the yard, my eyes scanning the crowd. Aunts, uncles, and cousins I'd only met a handful of times were talking, eating, and dancing. A few recognized me, waving hello, but I only nodded curtly. Then I saw my grandmother sitting on a wooden chair in a corner of the yard next to a patch of wildflowers. She wore a long green dress, her silver hair neatly tied back, her gaze distant as she looked toward the horizon. I approached, my heart tightening at how small and fragile she seemed. Grandma, I called softly, sitting beside her. She turned, her eyes lighting up when she saw me. "Marco, you're here!" She grabbed my hand, squeezing it tightly as if afraid I'd vanish. I was so worried. "Where did you go without saying anything?" I smiled, trying to hide the surge of emotions welling up inside me. "I'm sorry, Grandma. I had to take care of something, but I'm here now." She looked at me, her eyes searching as if trying to read what I was hiding. "What happened, Marco? You don't look okay." I took a deep breath, unsure where to begin. I didn't want to hurt her, but she deserved the truth. "Grandma, I went back to Mom and Dad's house in Scottsdale," I said, my voice low. "I overheard them talking about the drugs, about how they wanted to force you to sign papers, and they're planning to hurt you next." My grandmother froze, her hand trembling in mine. But her eyes showed no surprise, only a deep sadness. "I suspected as much," she whispered. But I didn't want to believe it. "They're my son, my daughter-in-law. How could they?" Her voice broke and I felt my eyes sting. I held her hand tightly, trying to keep my voice steady. "Grandma, I recorded what they said. I have proof. I won't let them hurt you, I promise." She looked at me, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. "Marco, you don't have to do this for me. You've already suffered enough." I shook my head, my voice firm. "No, Grandma. I'm doing this because I want to. Because you're the only one in this family who truly cares about me." She wiped her tears, her trembling hands steadying as her eyes regained the resilience I'd always admired. She squeezed my hand tighter, her voice soft but powerful. "Marco, listen to me. You've done so much already. You've protected me, faced things no one should have to. But now let yourself rest a little. Don't let this weigh on your heart." She paused, a gentle smile spreading across her face, her eyes sparkling under Sonora's fiery sunset. "We're here, surrounded by loved ones, laughter, and music. Forget those two people, at least for today. You deserve to be happy, Marco." I looked at her, a lump forming in my throat. Her words were like a cool breeze, easing some of the burning anger and pain in my heart. "Grandma, how can I be happy knowing they're plotting against you?" I asked, my voice still trembling. She shook her head, placing a hand on my cheek just like she did when I was a child. "Marco, life is short. If you let pain control you, you'll miss the beautiful moments. I don't want to see you live in anger. Let me see your smile like when you were little, chasing me around for tamales." I couldn't help but let out a soft laugh. The image of myself as a kid toddling after her in the small Scottsdale kitchen lightened my heart. "You always know how to make me smile," I said, squeezing her hand. She smiled back, her eyes twinkling. "Then get up, Marco. Come with me, eat some tacos, dance with your aunts and uncles. We're family, and family isn't those who hurt each other. It's the people standing here, ready to share joy." She pulled me to my feet and I let her lead me like an obedient child. We walked into the heart of the yard where the Navarro family reunion was in full swing. Long tables draped in white were laden with food. Fragrant grilled tacos, steaming tamales, spicy salsa, and refreshing fruit juice pitchers. Mariachi music filled the air with guitars and trumpets blending into a lively rhythm. Aunts, uncles, and distant cousins laughed, hugged, and danced under lanterns strung from tree branches. An aunt, Rosa, spotted me and squealed, "Marco, my little boy is here." She rushed over, enveloping me in a tight hug, the faint scent of jasmine perfume lingering. "It's been too long. You've grown so much. Come, eat with me. Don't let Beatrice hog you all to herself." I laughed, warmth spreading through me. My grandmother stood beside me, beaming, as if savoring every moment of seeing me blend into the family atmosphere. We sat at a table and Rosa pushed a plate of tacos piled with grilled beef and cilantro toward me. "Eat, Marco, don't be shy," she said, winking. I took a taco, biting into it, and the fiery salsa nearly made me choke, prompting laughter from everyone at the table. My grandmother patted my shoulder, laughing loudly. "You still can't handle spice, can you?" she teased, and I shook my head, pretending to scowl. "You act like I'm not Mexican." The reunion's energy swept me up like a warm river. I talked with Uncle Juan, who shared stories of my grandfather's days on construction sites, how he always brought candy home for the kids after long trips. I danced with Rosa, though I was so clumsy I nearly stepped on her toes. "Marco, you dance like a lamppost," she laughed, but still held my hand and pulled me into the center of the yard. My grandmother stood there, clapping to the music, her eyes shining as if no sadness had ever touched her. When the music slowed, I pulled my grandmother onto the dance floor. She laughed, trying to protest. "I'm too old, Marco, I can't dance." But I didn't let go. "Too old? You dance better than me." I took her hand, leading her in a slow, gentle sway to the guitar's rhythm. She laughed loudly, her silver hair fluttering in the night breeze, and my heart felt lighter than ever. In that moment, there were no parents, no drugs, no schemes. Just me and my grandmother, two souls finding each other amid laughter and music. The reunion stretched late into the night, the moon hanging high over Sonora's sky. I sat beside my grandmother on a wooden bench, sharing a plate of cinnamon-dusted churros. "Grandma, I don't remember the last time I felt this happy," I said, my voice softening. She smiled, placing a hand on my shoulder. "Marco, you're my joy. No matter what happens, I know you'll always do what's right. And today you've made me so happy." I looked at her, a lump in my throat. "Grandma, I want to take you to Flagstaff. I have a small house, not fancy but warm enough. I don't want you living near Mom and Dad anymore." She looked at me, her eyes full of love. "Marco, I'll go with you. Not because I'm afraid, but because I want to be with you. You're my home." I hugged her, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but with my grandmother by my side, I was no longer afraid. The reunion in Sonora ended a few days later. I helped my grandmother pack her final belongings, a favorite embroidered handkerchief, a box of leftover churros, and the old photo of my grandfather she always carried. We said goodbye to our relatives, who hugged us tightly, urging us to visit more often. Aunt Rosa slipped a bag of tamales into my hands, winking. "For the road, Marco, don't let Beatriz go hungry." I smiled, the warmth from last night's laughter still lingering. But as the truck rolled away from the ranch, I knew we couldn't return to life as it was. The recording on my phone, proof of my parents' scheme, was like a ticking time bomb, a reminder that things were far from over. I glanced at my grandmother, who was staring out the window, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Grandma, are you okay?" I asked softly. She smiled, but her eyes held a trace of sadness. "I'm fine, Marco. It's just, I still can't believe Matteo and Adriana would do such things. But I trust you, and that's what matters most." I nodded, gripping the steering wheel. "I won't let them hurt you, Grandma, I promise." But I knew keeping that promise meant acting quickly. Before leaving Sonora, I'd called Javier, asking him to keep the recording safe and to connect me with a lawyer he knew in Flagstaff. "I need to make sure Grandma is protected," I told him over the phone. "If my parents try anything, I want evidence to take to court." Javier agreed, his tone serious. "I'll handle that, Marco. Just focus on taking care of your grandmother." The drive from Sonora to Flagstaff was long and tiring, but I didn't feel weighed down. My grandmother shared old stories about her and my grandfather's youth, how they used to dance under the moonlight in this very village. I listened, laughed along, and felt like each story was a brick building a new home for us. But I knew before we could start anew, I had to return to Scottsdale one last time, to collect my grandmother's belongings and face my parents. We arrived in Scottsdale late in the afternoon, the golden sunlight glinting off the luxurious houses. I parked in front of my parents' house, my heart pounding. "Grandma, do you want to stay in the truck?" I asked, worried she'd feel uneasy seeing them. But she shook her head, her eyes resolute. "No, Marco, I'm coming with you. I want them to know I'm not afraid." I nodded, admiring her strength. We stepped out of the truck, her hand in mine, and I felt bolstered to face whatever lay ahead. I knocked on the door and my mother opened it, her eyes flickering with surprise before turning wary. "Marco? Beatrice? You're back already?" Her voice tried to sound calm, but I noticed her hands trembling slightly. I stepped inside, pulling my grandmother along, my voice firm. "We're here to get Grandma's things. She's not staying here anymore." My mother's jaw dropped and my father frowned. "What? Mom, you can't leave. This is your home." My grandmother stepped forward, her gaze sharp as ever. "Matteo, Adriana, I stayed here because I thought you needed me. But I was wrong. You didn't need me. You needed my money. Marco is the only one who truly cares about me, and I'm going with him." The room fell silent, the air thick with tension. My mother tried to say something, but my grandmother raised a hand, stopping her. "Don't say another word, Adriana. I know everything. About the drugs, about your plans. I'm disappointed but not surprised. You've chosen your path." My father stepped forward, his voice a low growl. "Mom, you can't do this. That estate belongs to the family, not just you." But my grandmother only glared at him, her eyes cutting like a knife. "The one who truly loves me is standing right here. And it's not you." My heart ached with both pain and pride. I took my grandmother's hand, leading her upstairs to gather her things. My parents stood there, silent, glaring at us with resentment, but saying nothing more. We quickly packed her clothes, personal items, and the photo of my grandfather. As we left the house, I turned back to look at them one last time. "Don't try to contact us," I said coldly. "If you do anything to Grandma, I'll take that recording to court." My mother paled, and my father clenched his fists, but they didn't dare act. We left Scottsdale as the sun set, the horizon glowing a fiery red. I drove toward Flagstaff, my grandmother beside me, holding the photo of my grandfather, her expression serene. "Marco," she said softly, "thank you. I've never felt this free." I smiled, feeling like an old chapter had just closed. When we reached Flagstaff, I led her into my small house, a simple wooden home with a sunny front yard and a corner I'd prepared for her to plant flowers. "Welcome home, Grandma," I said, opening the door. She smiled, stepping inside, and I knew that from now on we would build a new life together. The first few months in Flagstaff were the most peaceful I'd ever experienced. My grandmother quickly turned my small house into a true home. She planted a little garden in the front yard, cacti, wildflowers, and the roses she loved. Every morning I'd see her watering the plants, humming old Mexican songs, and my heart felt lighter than ever. The garage kept me busy, but I always made time to have dinner with her, listen to her stories, and laugh together like old friends. But I didn't forget what had happened. The recording remained safe with Javier, and I knew my parents weren't the type to give up easily. I contacted a lawyer in Flagstaff, Mr. Garcia, who helped me prepare legal measures to protect my grandmother. "Marco, that recording is enough to press charges if your parents try anything," Mr. Garcia said, his tone serious. "But it's best to keep your grandmother safe and avoid conflict." I agreed, but I stayed vigilant. 4 years passed in the blink of an eye. My grandmother remained strong, but I noticed she was growing weaker. Her morning gardening sessions became shorter, and she rested longer on the wooden bench. One evening, as we ate tamales she'd made, she took my hand, her eyes gentle. "Marco, I know my time is running out, but I'm happy because I have you." I forced a smile, my heart heavy. "Grandma, don't say that. You'll be with me for a long time." But she just smiled, shaking her head. "I've lived enough, Marco, and I've prepared everything." I didn't understand what she meant until she passed away one winter night, peacefully in her sleep in my arms. I held her, tears streaming down my face, feeling like I'd lost a piece of my heart. But I also knew she'd left with a smile, no longer afraid or alone. A week later, Mr. Garcia called me to his office. "Marco, Beatrice left a will," he said, handing me a stack of documents. I opened them, my heart pounding. My grandmother had left everything to me: the house in Scottsdale, the land and shares in Mexico, and a substantial savings account. The will was drawn up 3 years ago, notarized and signed by 2 witnesses, old friends of hers in Flagstaff. She wanted to make sure you were taken care of, Mr. Garcia said, his voice low, and she knew you wouldn't let the estate fall into the wrong hands. I sat there, stunned, not because of the wealth, but because of my grandmother's love for me. I didn't want money or land. I just wanted her back, sitting beside me, telling her old stories. But I knew this was her way of protecting me even after she was gone. Not long after, my parents showed up. They came to Flagstaff, standing at my doorstep, demanding to sue for the estate. "That's the family's, Marco," my mother shouted, her voice full of rage. "You have no right to keep it all." But I just looked at them, my voice cold. "Grandma made her choice, and you know why. If you want to sue, go ahead. I have the recording and I'll take it to court." They paled, said nothing more, and turned away. I knew they wouldn't dare sue. My grandmother's will was ironclad, and they had no chance of winning. I didn't rejoice over the estate. I only felt a deep sense of peace knowing I'd kept my promise to my grandmother. I sold the Scottsdale house, using the money to expand the garage and donate to a community center in Flagstaff. The land in Mexico I kept as a way to remember her and my grandfather. Every day I went to her garden, watered the roses, and felt like she was still there, smiling at me. I sit here in my small room in Flagstaff, morning sunlight streaming through the window, making dust motes sparkle like tiny stars. Before me is an old notebook, its leather cover worn, where I've written down this story. I write not to boast or seek validation, but to preserve what my grandmother taught me, about family, about honesty, and about choosing to do what's right, no matter how hard it is. I write so that my children, if I have them someday, will know that family isn't about blood, but about the people we choose to love and protect. 7 years have passed since that fateful night in Scottsdale when I learned the truth about my parents. 7 years since I took my grandmother away from a house filled with schemes and calculations to start a new life in Flagstaff. 4 years since she passed, leaving me not just an estate but a priceless lesson, that a person's true value lies not in what they own, but in what they're willing to sacrifice for others. I still work at the garage, now expanded with 3 employees and a small corner I turned into a cafe where customers can sip coffee while waiting for their cars. I named it Beatrice's Corner in honor of my grandmother. Every morning when I open the garage, I see the wooden sign with her name, and I feel like she's still here watching over me. Her garden still blooms in the front yard, the vibrant red roses reminding me of her gentle smile, of the days we sat together, eating tamales and sharing stories. My parents never reached out again. After that final confrontation in Scottsdale, they vanished from my life, as if I'd never been their son. I heard their company went bankrupt not long after, and they moved somewhere in California. I didn't look into it further, not because I didn't care, but because I'd learned to let go. They chose their path and I chose mine. I don't hate them. Hate would only weigh me down, as my grandmother once said. I only regret that they let greed blind them, costing them the most precious thing: family. Javier, my friend at the police department, still keeps the recording locked in his safe. "Marco, what do you want me to do with it?" he's asked me a few times. I just shake my head. "Keep it, Javier. If they come back, we'll need it." But I hope that day never comes. I don't want to live in the past, don't want old schemes to define my life. I want to live the way my grandmother did, with kindness, resilience, and faith that everything will be okay as long as we have each other. One summer afternoon, I sit on the wooden bench in the garden, holding the old photo of my grandfather she left behind. I look at him, a man with a radiant smile, standing beside an old truck, and I wonder if he'd be proud of me. I'm not a businessman like my father, not wealthy or prestigious, but I kept my promise to my grandmother. I protected her, gave her final years filled with peace and laughter, and I think maybe that's what he'd value most. I write these words not to seek forgiveness or sympathy. I write to remind myself that no matter how hard life gets, we always have a choice. I chose to stand by my grandmother. Not for wealth, not for glory, but because she was the only one who saw me, not as a failed mechanic, but as a man with an honest heart. "Marco," she once said, "you don't need to prove anything to anyone. Just be yourself and that's enough." The message I want to leave behind for my children or anyone who reads these words is this: family isn't something we're given. It's something we build. It's not in blood, but in the moments we choose to stand up for others, even if it means facing those closest to us. Greed may bring money, but it takes away what's most precious: trust, love, and the people we call family. I learned that from my grandmother, and I'll live by that lesson until the end of my days. I close the notebook, place it on the table, and step out into the garden. The roses are in full bloom, their sweet fragrance filling the air. I pick up the watering can as my grandmother used to and water each plant, each drop like a whisper to her. "Grandma, I'm still here and I'll never forget you." I smile, feeling her somewhere out there, still smiling back as she did in the days we were together. I don't know what the future holds, but I know one thing. I made the right choice. I chose my grandmother, and that was the most beautiful decision of my life.